My grandfather had a very illustrious career, which actually started almost by accident, because my grandfather, prior to being a ballroom dancer, was a war hero. He ran away from school aged 14 to go and join the army in 1914. He was born in 1900, and he was underage, and he was found out and sent home to his parents, my great-grandfather being the Vicar of Wembley. But my grandfather was very gung-ho and very keen to play his part in World War I, so he returned to the front lines in Italy as a stretcher bearer. He was shot in the leg very badly. Having been shot, he carried on bearing stretchers until he almost bled to death himself, and for that he was awarded the Italian Bronze Medal for Valour, and he was sent home to recuperate. By this point it was 1918, the war was about to end, and having recuperated enough to start being able to exercise again, a cousin of his invited him to a tea dance at the Georgian tea rooms at Harrods. A dance teacher saw him, saw that he had natural rhythm when he danced, and immediately invited him to become a dance teacher. And she would train him and teach him to ballroom dance. And so he thought, this is great because it's a great way of exercising. And within 3 years, he entered the first ever World Ballroom Dancing Championships with his then dancing partner, a lady called Phyllis Clark, and he won it. And from there on in, his life changed hugely, because suddenly he was a World Ballroom Dancing Champion and a dance teacher. He then married my grandmother, a dancer as well, and they became dance teachers in their own right, and my grandfather set up the Tara Silvester Dancing School. In 1935, my grandfather was exceedingly frustrated by the fact that there was no proper tempo by which to dance. And having already written a book called Modern Ballroom Dancing, which taught people to dance, he decided to turn his attentions to the music that people danced to. He set up an orchestra with a band leader called Oscar Grasso, who he worked with, and together they created the beats and the tempos that everybody uses to this day, and this is called strict tempo ballroom dancing music. He started a radio program on the World Service, and this brought his music around the world. He had a signature tune called You're Dancing on My Heart, which became very well known around the world, and it always opened his radio program. In 1947, the BBC started recording TV at Alexandra Palace, and they invited my grandfather to start a programme called Television Dancing Club, which would teach people to dance, and that programme ran until 1964, when times and trends changed. However, as a radio presenter, a World Ballroom Dancing Champion, a man with a very well-known orchestra, and now an early TV programme, he was a real celebrity in 1957. And that is why he was surprised on This Is Your Life. So the first time I became fully aware of his huge fame was when he died. My grandfather died when I was 10 years old, and I did manage to see him every day because he lived almost next door with my grandmother, so I used to go for tea every day, and it was wonderful. But my grandfather was retired. There wasn't a lot of memorabilia around the house. I was aware that my family were in entertainment because my father, Victor Silvester Jr., had already taken over my grandfather's orchestra, and I was aware that it belonged to my grandfather beforehand. So after my father died in 1999, we had a number of garages and storage areas in the block of flats where we lived, and I suddenly came across somewhat of a treasure trove of awards and different items that I had never seen before, pieces of memorabilia as such. And in a box, somewhat water damaged, were three things: a record, a 78 record, a script, and a big red book that had my grandfather's name on it. I didn't know that he'd been on This Is Your Life, so it was somewhat of a surprise, but it was in a terrible state. Actually, in my professional career, which has nothing to do with ballroom dancing, I work for makers and designers, and I was always very fascinated by the repair shop because the people who are on it are absolutely the best at what they do. And I had gone out to lunch with some old friends who also really liked the programme, and in a passing reference I said to them, do you know what I should do? I should really take that battered This Is Your Life book and apply to the repair shop and see if they would fix it. And they looked at me and said, we don't want to speak to you until you've applied. You've got to do it. So let's say the lunch was on a Friday. On the Sunday, I went on the BBC website and applied to go on the programme, explained exactly what I had and asked whether they would be interested in fixing it. But the process started with an application form, and then I was called by a researcher who asked me to explain the story. Then I was asked to send images of the books to see what kind of state they were in. Then I was asked to do a video interview, I think to check me. Then they had to vet me, check all my social media pages. They also had to check that the books actually belonged to me. And that was all fine, everything was passed. And eventually they called me and said, how will you feel when it's repaired? And I said, delighted. And then I got there. They really look after you, it's lovely. It's filmed in a barn, as we all know, but they asked me every question from the start of my grandfather's life all the way through to when he died, but it was a lovely process. They made me feel exceedingly welcome and I didn't feel nervous at all. Chris Shaw is the best bookbinder in the business, and what he did was sensational. I was genuinely excited. So there was we had to arrange a date. I knew the books had been done a week or so, a few weeks beforehand, but I could only arrange a certain date, and the level of excitement was growing as I was standing outside the barn door. I walked in. It's a one-shot thing. You know, what you see is what you get on the programme, that moment of surprise. They don't do it over and over again. And they did the big reveal, and it was amazing. The script, as I had brought it in, actually started to disintegrate while it was on the table. And the leather-bound big red book was just in an appalling state. It had no spine, and there were bits of it actually inside the book. It was in a terrible way, and to see them just brought back to life, which is what they had done, was just so exciting. I was absolutely thrilled, and I still am. I was just so happy that these books had been brought back to life. And the reason why is because I couldn't show them to anybody, because they would just fall to bits. And now I can proudly show them to people, and you know, that's such a difference. I don't have much belonging to my grandparents, and this is really, really precious to me, and they made that happen. I think that my grandfather's story it's a lovely story. I inherited this fantastic family heritage, and I'm so proud of that. I hope I didn't let my grandfather down. That was the most important thing about me being on the programme. The whole process the way that they treat you, the way that the presenters genuinely show interest, and that's what really came across to me. They were all really, really powerfully interested in the story. It was one of the best experiences of my life, actually, and so I'm really proud to have done it.